The Torah devotes much effort to explicating in detail the architecture of the sacred space of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and it devotes even more detail to the sacrifices that will be performed there, and later in the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. This seemingly points to how much significance is placed on religious sacrifices in the Jewish tradition. And even though the sacrificial order is no longer practiced since the destruction of the temple, Jews continued to uphold the importance of animal sacrifices in their wish for its restoration in the Messianic time. This is clear from the liturgy of the Amidah prayer, in which we pray, V'ashevat avodah ledvir beitecha, v'ishe Yisrael u'tfilatam ba'ava, titkaber b'ratzon, u'tehi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Restore the service of your sanctuary and accept with love and favor Israel's fire offerings. However, a counter-tradition exists within Judaism which views the worship conducted in the tabernacle and the temple as a divine concession to the spiritual limitations of the Jewish people in their early stages of development. In an earlier video, I focused upon Avram Yehoshua Heschel as a representative of this counter-tradition. In this video, I will look at Maimonides' important contribution to the devaluation of sacrifices and the belief that it should not be a component of the Messianic era. Moses Maimonides' view appears in his rationale for sacrifices in his philosophic work, The Guide of the Perplexed. This discussion is part of the section on reason for commandments in general. Maimonides claims there that all commandments somehow are related to and help us advance in the ultimate purpose of the Torah, which is a better understanding of God. He must therefore explain the relationship between sacrifices and this rational goal. In this regard, he famously and controversially argues, and I'm quoting here, it is impossible to go from one extreme to the other suddenly. Therefore, human beings, according to their nature, are not capable of suddenly abandoning that to which they were deeply accustomed. As it was then, the deeply ingrained and universal practices with which people were brought up to conduct religious worship with animal sacrifices in temples. So Maimonides claims that God acts as a consummate educator who is attuned precisely to where his or her students are at. God realizes that the Jews who are deeply immersed in Egyptian pagan culture cannot suddenly change their values through a divine fiat. Instead, God must conduct a gradual and protracted educational process, and the mitzvot, including sacrifices, are divine educational tools. Consequently, sacrifices were instituted by God not because this was the proper way to worship God. Rather, it was a response to the fact that Jews held idolatrous views and then could not suddenly abandon them. The deity therefore allowed Jews to continue to sacrifice, but they must sacrifice to God rather than to idols. The intention of the commandments, though, is to gradually wean the Jews from this lower form of worship and replace sacrifices with prayer, which is a more elevated form of divine reverence and adoration. One can deduct from there, one can deduct from here that the destruction of the temple and the cessation of sacrifices was for Maimonides actually an opportunity rather than a catastrophe. It also shows us that the counter-tradition to Judaism, which viewed the temple and sacrifices in an ambivalent manner, had an important representative in the greatest Jewish philosopher, Moses Maimonides. Shavua Tov from Schechter.